Hey everybody, I am hoping that this is working. I'm actually going to check the group real quick on my computer just to make sure it is, because I'm testing a new setup and I want to make sure that it's actually working properly, and it looks like it is. Yay! Awesome. So I'm hoping that some people can jump on here live because I'd love to answer your guys' questions, but if not, you guys can all catch the replay and you can leave questions down in the comments section below, and I'll get to those later on as they come in. So you guys, I sent out a poll in the group a couple of weeks ago, and I really appreciate you guys giving me feedback on what you guys want to learn about. So it was super helpful for me to know that figuring out what foods work for you and your body is really kind of a hot topic for you guys. And that's not something that I would have originally thought about. So I'm glad that you gave me that insight. So today I'm actually going to talk about 3 ways that you can start figuring out what foods work for your body. So I ended up writing a blog post about this, which I've linked to in the video description, and I'm going to refer back to it a little bit because I made a ton of notes this morning and realized that I just needed to write a blog post about it, so it kind of got huge. And in an effort to keep this video, reasonably short and not be like an hour-long video, I thought I would write a blog post so you guys can go over there for more in-depth information if you want to read further on this. So I want to start off with a couple of things. So first, I am coming to this from a very food-neutral place. I have not always been food neutral. I have had my own history of disordered eating, which actually evolved into an undiagnosed eating disorder, and restrictive diets really played a big role in that. So I'm coming to this from a food neutral place. In my world, hi Elizabeth, thank you for joining, yay, I have somebody. If you're on here, like, Facebook doesn't tell me who joins. I can just see that there's like a number of people that have joined up at the top, but I don't know who it is. So pop in and say hi and let me know that you're here. Otherwise, I feel like I'm kind of talking to myself, which, I do that a lot too, or I talk to my dogs. But it's always nice to actually talk to people. So anyways, so food neutral place. In my world, in my perfect world, there's no such thing as a good food and a bad food. There's simply foods that work well for me or work well for you. Hi, Vicky. And there's also foods that don't work well for me or don't work well for you. And I think what we need to do, in my experience, the whole good food, bad food thing causes a whole lot of morality issues for a lot of people. Not for everybody, but for a lot of people, because then we start associating ourselves with being good or being bad depending on what we eat. So this is kind of a topic for a different video, but I just wanted to kind of preface this. So I really have worked hard, and I still continue to work hard on letting go of this idea that there's all these bad foods out there, and that, like, if I eat a carb or I eat a nightshade, it's a bad food, because for a really long time those foods were on my bad list. So I want everybody to kind of transition to more of a food neutral thing, or a food neutral place. So when I'm talking about good foods and bad foods, I'm not really referring to those foods that I consider more like play foods or food-like substances. If it's a flat-out junk food made with really junk ingredients, highly refined oils, highly refined flours, highly refined sugars, I'm just going to choose not to put that in my body, because I don't even really view that as food. I view that as a food-like substance, because it doesn't offer us any nutrition. It might taste good and it might be fine to indulge in once in a while, kind of a play food, but as something that's going to be part of my main diet, I don't even really consider those as foods. So kind of a little bit of background there. And I also want to preface this because I know some of you guys in this group, but there's a large chunk of people that I don't know. So if you have really severe disordered eating, or you have an actual diagnosed eating disorder, when you start playing around with what foods work for you, you probably want to involve a professional. So especially if you have an eating disorder, you need to be talking to your MD or to your registered dietitian or whoever your primary care person is about this, because this can be triggering for a lot of people, and I want to make sure that you guys don't get triggered and then end up having some negative effects from this. So I just wanted to kind of preface that. If you've got really bad disordered eating, or you just have a lot of unwanted behaviors around food, then you might seek out the support of a coach or somebody who can support you through this process and make it a little bit easier for you as you go along. So just a few little disclaimers that I wanted to put out there first. So I'm looking over here at my notes. That's why I'm looking away from the camera. So I want to say that the process of figuring out what works for you and what doesn't, it can be a little bit of a slow process, and you have to be willing to kind of do some work on it. And we have to be willing to evolve. So you may be at a certain stage in your life, you know, maybe you're 30 years old or you're 50 years old, where certain foods are going to work really well for you right now and other foods won't. But, you know, 5 or 10 years down the road, those same foods may no longer work for you. They may no longer give you the energy or the clarity that you need every day. So we just want to stay in this really fluid place when it comes to food. We need to be willing to let ourselves evolve so that we can really serve our bodies and give our bodies the nourishment it needs without staying stuck and really, really rigid on whatever dietary style may have worked for us in the past, but now it doesn't. So I see this a lot. People we get stuck in ruts. We think that just because we were on a certain style of eating, that style is going to serve us well for our entire life, and that's simply not true, because our nutritional needs are going to evolve as we age, as we go through different life periods, as we have more stress or less stress, or maybe we're pregnant and breastfeeding and then other times we're not. So we have to be willing to go with the flow, evolve, stay fluid when it comes to food, and really kind of break out of this rigid mindset that a lot of us have. And that goes for me too. I work on this almost every single day, so I am far from perfect when it comes to food. So when it comes to food sensitivities, and so the main reason that people want to figure out what foods work for them is they may be suspecting that they have some food sensitivities, or they maybe even got some food allergies. And so they want to just kind of figure out, like, hey, what's working for my body and what's not, and maybe I should eliminate some certain foods. And I think that is that's obviously a great reason to come to this. Anything we can do to support our health and keep inflammation down is going to be key to creating long-term health and giving us more clarity and energy throughout the day. So most of the reasons that you would want to do this is you might be dealing with some sort of health challenge, or you just might have some suspicions that there's something going on, that maybe a certain food is just not working for you. So some of the symptoms of food intolerances, food sensitivities, and even food allergies can be anything from headaches to fatigue to bloating to constipation and diarrhea and/or diarrhea. Some people get both. Some people kind of tend towards one way or the other. You can have skin breakouts. Like, I know some people, if they consume dairy, they start getting pimples on their face. You might have eczema flare-ups or a psoriasis flare-up. You might even notice that you get really moody after you eat certain foods. I mean, all of these are symptoms of maybe some sort of intolerance and potentially an allergy. There's going to be certain people that really are truly allergic to certain foods. In those cases, they tend to be quite a bit more severe, and you might want to do some additional testing. But for the majority of people who may just be having kind of a general sensitivity or a small reaction to certain foods, typically some of the strategies I'm going to share today will help you. And I want to kind of talk about the food sensitivity and food allergy testing a little bit, because a lot of times we kind of get stuck in this mindset that, oh, well, we can just test and we'll know for sure. So I actually am not a huge fan of food sensitivity testing. Now, I'm using food sensitivity testing that's kind of different, quite a bit different from food allergy testing. If you know that you're absolutely allergic to shellfish or to gluten, if you have celiac disease, that's kind of a different ballpark. But for the majority of people who maybe just are dealing with sensitivities and no really severe allergies, I don't think food sensitivity testing is necessarily all that great. And the reason being is from my own experience and also talking to some of my colleagues and a couple of my mentors about this, in that they can be a little bit faulty. So in my own case, several years ago, I did a food sensitivity testing. I kind of plateaued on my healing journey, and I didn't have any like horribly debilitating symptoms, nothing like super huge, but I just was curious. So I did this food sensitivity testing, which was just a blood test. They just poked my finger and then they tested a whole bunch of different stuff. So it came back, I don't remember the numbers, but I was sensitive to like almost 100 different foods. So my practitioner at the time suggested that I eliminate those foods for a little bit and see if I noticed any improvements. and it really left me with just a very small handful of food, which was super frustrating in and of itself. But I feel like actually I kind of know when we start restricting our diet so intently, it can create lots of other issues. It can create unwanted behaviors around food and body. If you're restricting, some people may end up finding themselves binging because they're doing this seesaw back and forth. And it can also really negatively impact your gut microbiome. And this is something that I'm just starting to learn about. But really restrictive diets can be negative for your gut microbiome because our gut, all of our little microbes that are in us and on us, they need variety to keep us happy and healthy, and to keep the good flora from becoming outnumbered by the bad flora. So I tread lightly whenever it comes to things like this. Of course, everybody's situation is going to be different, but I'm just kind of speaking from my own personal experience. So that whole experience of the food sensitivity testing, I eliminated all these foods. I think I did a full 3 months without any of the foods I was reacting to, which was like almost 100 foods. It really triggered some severely disordered behaviors for me around food, and it kind of exacerbated my undiagnosed eating disorder at the time. So it was not something that I would recommend doing again unless you're really, really working closely with somebody. And that was actually the catalyst for me learning to tune into my intuition. I was like, there has to be a better way than a faulty test that has me literally eating like 5 different foods every single day, which in and of itself can create food sensitivities, because if you're eating the same exact thing every single day, day in and day out, you can create sensitivities to those foods. So then eventually those become off limits. So it's kind of this whole cascade of crap that happens. That's when I really started deciding that I was going to pay attention to my intuition, to my body wisdom. And I will tell you what, your body wisdom and your own intuition will trump testing, and they will trump expert advice every single time. I can guarantee it. So a lot of people get kind of hung up here though, because we're just not taught as a culture. Speaking from I'm in America, I'm not sure where everybody else is, but from an American standpoint, we're not really taught how to listen to our intuition, how to tune into our body's wisdom. Our body is constantly giving us feedback every single day, little cues like, hey, this is awesome, or hey, you might want to think again about that, or hey, this food is not working for me, or hey, you were just exposed to a toxin that is not working for you. So we don't even know how to listen to our bodies. So the process of figuring out what works and what doesn't work is going to kind of take you on a deep dive into getting to know yourself, which I can promise you that getting to know what works for you and listen to your body cues and tuning into your intuition, that is going to serve you well for the rest of your life. So I'm a huge, huge advocate of listening to body wisdom, because it will trump the expert advice and it will trump any test out there every single time. So that leads me into the very first tip that I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you 3 tips today, and you guys can read more about this in detail over on the blog that I linked to. But the first one, tuning into your intuition. You want to figure out what foods work for you and what don't. Listen to your intuition. And this is going to be a slow process, especially if you're not someone who was raised to be very intuitive. Some people are super sensitive. They're really intuitive. They really, really understand what's going on in their body from the very start. Some people are just kind of wired that way, but a lot of us are not. A lot of us were not given these skills. So it's just going to take a little bit of time and a little bit of patience. So think back to some of the symptoms that I mentioned earlier. So moodiness, bloating, indigestion, heartburn, fatigue, headaches, congestion, diarrhea, and constipation. Those are all symptoms of potential food sensitivities. So start paying attention to when these things happen for you. And then you can sometimes backtrack and say, hey, I've got a really bad headache today and I am super moody, and I ate a bunch of dairy yesterday, or I had a bunch of had cheesecake or pizza the day before yesterday, and now I'm feeling really kind of run down and icky. So you can start making some little correlations like that. And once you start doing that, you're going to start recognizing things more easily. So really paying attention to those little cues, just checking in with yourself throughout the day. And I wish that I could tell you that this is a super, super easy thing to do, and I totally get that it's not. We're all busy. We are stressed out. We live in a world that doesn't teach this kind of stuff. But if you just take a little bit of time, check in with yourself in the morning, check in with yourself in the evening and the afternoon, and say, hey, like, are there any sensations in my body right now? Is there an area that is hurting? Are there any twinges of pain? Do I feel foggy? Do I feel extra fatigued today? Start paying attention to how your body is feeling. And then if you say you ate a lot of one specific food, maybe you had a bunch of gluten, or you maybe ate some nightshades, and then you're noticing that the next day maybe your joints are hurting, or you just feel kind of inflamed and achy. You could start making some correlations that way. Maybe you eat nightshades and the next day you notice that your wrists and your ankles hurt. Or maybe you eat dairy and you notice that you're super congested the next day, or you have a lot of brain fog or a lot of fatigue. An interesting thing about dairy for me, this is something that I never even thought about until I actually had a friend tell me this several years ago. I get super stiff necks whenever I eat dairy. So dairy for a long time has been kind of on the no-no food list for me, and I've known that. It doesn't stop me from eating some cheese from time to time because frankly I just love cheese. But when I do, I've tested this out a lot over the last year, and I can tell if I eat dairy, I get congested almost right off the bat. Like eat dairy, get congested. That's been very typical for me. But I will notice that the next day or 48 hours after, I will have super, super stiff neck. And I'm like, moving my neck all the time, all day, like trying to loosen it up. And then it kind of leads to a headache. So weird things like that, whenever you're noticing food sensitivities, they may not always manifest the way that you think they are. You may not always be bloated, or you may not always have a headache. It may be some other kind of weird thing that is very unique to you. The neck pain, the neck stiffness related to dairy, I would have never even thought about that. But now I know. So that was just me tuning in and kind of making these connections of like, I have this issue this day. What did I potentially eat within the last 72 hours that could have triggered that for me? And that's another thing to remember, is that your symptoms, your reactions to certain foods may not come right away. I mean, for some people, you might know, like, you eat dairy and within a few hours you're feeling horrible. But other people, it might take longer. It can sometimes take upwards of 72 hours for a symptom to come through. So don't always expect like, hey, I ate this certain thing, I should feel a certain way within 24 or even 48 hours. Give yourself a full 72 hours to really see if something is happening for you. So the next step, if you're kind of struggling with that or you really want to go deeper, will be the elimination diet. So the gold standard of figuring out food sensitivities is always going to be an elimination diet, because as long as we're eating the foods that are causing reactions in our body, we're just going to constantly be inflamed. We're going to be producing antibodies to these foods if they don't agree with us. And so an elimination diet, you essentially remove the most common allergens or whatever you might suspect. You remove that from your diet for a certain amount of time, and then you will re-add that food into your diet, and you will notice whether or not you have any noticeable reactions. And you may also, like when you eliminate this food within a day or two or three, or maybe the first week, you may notice like, hey, I feel a heck of a lot better. Whatever X, Y, and Z symptom I had, maybe it's completely gone. And that's a pretty good indication that maybe that food is just not working for you. So elimination diets can be tricky. They can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you have a propensity towards some disordered behaviors around food. Or maybe you just haven't, you've tried them in the past and you just haven't gotten the support that you really needed. I feel like we need to offer a little bit of extra emotional support when it comes to elimination diets, because the most common allergens, let me just read those off really quick. So we've got gluten, dairy, corn, soy, and eggs. Those tend to be the most common ones for people. And again, I'm talking about food sensitivities. I'm not necessarily talking about food allergies. People who absolutely have to avoid these foods or else they go into anaphylactic shock or whatever else happens to them if they eat those foods. I'm talking mainly about people who can still function just fine. Maybe they're just, reacting on a very, very low level to that. So you've got those top 5: gluten, dairy, corn, soy, and eggs. And then refined sugars and flours. So that kind of goes along with just really refined sugars and flours don't really give us, our bodies, any nutrient value anyways, so I kind of avoid those. I encourage people to avoid those. Nuts and seeds can be problematic for some people, so like, your walnuts, your even chia seeds and stuff like that. Nightshades, which is going to be your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplant, and white potatoes, not sweet potatoes. Those are different. White potatoes are in the nightshade family. And then legumes, which are all your beans, peanuts, things like that. So what you can do for an elimination diet, if you decide you want to go this direction, you can remove any or all of those foods from your diet for a certain amount of time. 30 days is really the recommended minimum of removing those, because this gives your body a full month to kind of start healing and rest and repair, and for any antibody levels to go down within your body. So anytime you eat a food that you're not, that you're reacting to, your body will produce antibodies to that food in a lot of cases. So this kind of gives your body a chance to kind of come back down to neutral. And then you can start adding those foods back in very slowly, and you can see if you notice any difference. A lot of people will do like a full-blown elimination diet. They'll just remove all of those foods right off the bat. Sure, that's fine if that's what you want to do. I think it can be a little bit more challenging. Some people will choose to do it one at a time. Maybe they'll remove gluten for 1 month and they'll see how they feel. Then they'll remove dairy for another month and see how they feel. Sometimes people will notice immediate reactions. Like I mentioned, if you get rid of dairy or you get rid of gluten, within a day or 2 or 3, you might notice that, hey, I feel a heck of a lot better now. So you could just choose to leave that food out if you know that it's not working for you, or you can go like 30 days and then you can reintroduce that food and see if you start having those same symptoms or those same reactions that you were noticing in the past. So totally up to you. Elimination diets, you really can do them kind of any way you want, but the main purpose is a way to go is to eliminate those foods, whichever foods you think you're sensitive to, leave them out for at least 30 days, and then reintroduce them very slowly. Remember that it takes upwards of 72 hours in some cases for your body to react. So you don't want to just all of a sudden say, I'm going to add all of these foods back in the same day. So you want to add one food and give that 72 hours, and then if there's no reactions, you can maybe move on to the next food. If you don't feel confident doing an elimination diet on your own, or you want some extra guidance, then by all means work with a practitioner. You guys could reach out to me. We could talk about your needs and create some sort of plan that's going to work specifically for you, and you'll have extra support along the way. And that's the other thing that is really important with these elimination diets is having that extra support, because food is such an emotional, visceral thing for us, because so many of our memories are tied to food. Like it might be holidays with the family, or birthday parties that are, we have food at birthday parties, or maybe celebrations of major life events that take place at your favorite restaurant. So we have a lot of emotion tied up into food. And so when all of a sudden somebody says, okay, you need to eliminate 15 foods from your diet, you're gonna be like, what the heck? Like, this totally sucks, and yeah, I don't necessarily want to do it. So that's why I think having that emotional support and going into it with an idea that, hey, this is just an experiment, nothing is permanent, you don't have to leave these foods out for the rest of your life if you don't want to. It's just an experiment. You're essentially being a detective for your body. You're going in, you're trying to gather information so that you can just make more empowered decisions for your health and for your life. So just staying really fluid and really, what's the word I'm looking for? Not being rigid about it. Just everything's an experiment. Hey, we're going to test this out for a month and see how we do. And if you notice no improvements, then no harm, no foul. Go back to eating the foods that you've eliminated. That's totally fine. I'm all about empowering people to just make better choices. If they have problems like this, if they have problems around food, then let's give you the information and really give you back the power to make the best decisions you can possibly make for yourself. So that's the elimination diet. Now, the last one that I want to talk about, hold on, scrolling over to look at my notes so that I don't forget anything. I'm sure I've already forgotten 1,000 things I wanted to say, but it's all in the blog post. Next, I'm going to talk about carbs and starch tolerance. And there's probably no other food group right now in the nutrition world that has as much controversy as carbohydrates. Everywhere you turn, you've got people saying carbs are the devil, and then you've got carbs are good for you, we need carbs. And the thing is you're going to be able to find scientific, really quality information that support whatever stance you want to take regarding carbs. So when it comes to carbs, I, again, try to stay pretty neutral. I'm all about, hey, let's figure out what carbs work for you and in what amounts. And if you're one of those lucky people that can eat a whole bunch of carbs and you have no issues at all, then awesome. If you're somebody that has to be a little bit more conscientious about the amount of carbs you eat every day, then awesome. Let's just figure out where you're at so that you don't have to be guessing, and you don't have to be worrying, and you don't have to be listening to all of this chatter in the nutrition world about carbs are bad for you, no, carbs are good for you, and it's just constant arguing. This is an area I get really sick of, is this whole battle over carbohydrates, because I don't think there's anything that is more confusing right now for people. So when it comes to carbs and carb tolerance, and when I'm talking about carbs in this context, I'm talking about your starchy stuff. So I'm talking about your rice and your grains, like your oats and wheat and stuff like that. I'm also talking about your legumes, which can be starchy. They do have a lot of fiber in there though, so that kind of offsets some of that. I'm talking about your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, your white potatoes, starchy squash, your fruits, especially the higher sugar fruits like bananas and dates and figs and stuff like that. And then also your sweeteners, all of the sweeteners really, but, and primarily if you're using natural sweeteners, but really even if you're not using natural sweeteners and you're still using cane sugar or whatever your sweetener is of choice, it's still a good idea to see how is that sugar impacting my body. And then your flours, of course, even your alternative gluten and grain-free flours, but also your gluten-containing flours as well. So that's what I'm lumping into the carb category. I'm not talking about the carbs that you just get out of your normal non-starchy veggies. Those typically are not going to be as big of an issue for people unless they have a lot of really, really severe metabolic damage. And in that case, they may have to be a little bit more careful about everything that they eat. But for the general population, I'm just referring to your main starches. So the easiest way to do this, or the least complicated way, is to start testing your blood sugar. This is something that everybody can do. It doesn't cost a ton. In my blog post, I've linked to a glucometer, which is your blood sugar testing tool. You can pick them up at any store, Target, Walmart, Amazon, any place you can get them. And there's a ton that range from really, really cheap to really, really expensive, and the readings can vary a bit depending on what you get. The one that I linked to in the blog post is one that was recommended to me by Chris Kresser. For those of you that are familiar with him, he's a holistic practitioner, very, very well known and very well established, and I trust his work. I've actually done one of his clinical trainings, and he really knows his stuff, and he presents it in a way that makes it easy for people to understand. And this is one that he's found in his own practice to be very reliable, and it's not very expensive. I think it's under $20 if I remember correctly. So you get a glucometer, and then you just start testing your blood sugar. So I kind of outline in the blog post how you want to do that. But this is really the clearest way for you to get good data on how carbs are impacting your body. So what I recommend doing is, well, first you want to get a baseline. So you always want to have a baseline blood sugar reading. So that could be your fasting blood sugar, whatever. You want to test it before you eat anything. And then you're going to want to test your blood sugar again at 1 hour, 2 hour, and 3 hour marks. And this trend will show you what your fasting blood sugar is, and then you eat a carbohydrate and it's going to spike up. That's completely normal. But then you want to see how long it takes you to get back down to whatever your baseline is. And that's going to kind of give you some good indication of what your insulin, potential insulin resistance could be, or what your carbohydrate tolerance is going to be. And there really is no better way to get information on what you can tolerate when it comes to carbs than testing your blood sugar. I've done this myself, and it's one thing that every practitioner I know really kind of recommends if you've got concerns around carbohydrates. And a lot of people do in today's world, because we have a lot of metabolic damage from years of just, really bad nutrition and really poor quality food in our society. So there's no better way to get good readings and really understand what works for you. When it comes to this, I want to make sure if you guys do want to test your own blood sugar, it's super easy to do, but test one carbohydrate at a time. Don't have, like, if you have a meal that maybe has a bunch of sweet potatoes and rice and beans in it, then you're not going to be able to get as good of a indication of how those carbs are affecting you. So I would test, like, have rice for one meal, and then test sweet potatoes at a different time, and then test plantains at a different time, and then test honey at a different time. And that way you really can start tailoring this, like, hey, like, rice works really well for me, but sweet potatoes don't. And what you want to see is you come back down to your fasting or your pre-meal reading as quickly as possible. So within that 3-hour window, I've heard some practitioners say that they prefer to see it within a 2-hour window. So that's kind of the ultimate goal here. But this will give you a good way to chart that. And I know people who they absolutely cannot tolerate rice, but they can tolerate sweet potatoes. And other people who can't tolerate any kind of potato, but they can tolerate plantains. These are all really high starch, high carb foods. But again, we're so individually different that some foods just work better in our bodies than others. So we have to be open to exploring that. And really, there's no better way to know which carbs are working for you than to just test your blood sugar. And remember, I want to preface this because for me, testing my blood sugar was a huge trigger for me of worthiness. Like, I felt like if I had a high reading, it made me a bad person. I did something wrong. I was just wrong. Everything I was doing was wrong. So when you're testing these numbers, again, come to it from a place of, hey, I'm being an investigator. I am a detective in my own health, and I'm going to see what information I gather. This is purely an information gathering exercise that will just allow you to make more empowered choices for your health and for your life. So you're not good if you have a really low reading. You're not bad if you have a high reading. There's no morality around here. You guys are awesome. You're just gathering information. And then also, this could be a good way for you, if you do notice that you maybe are running a little bit on the high side, you can bring this information to your practitioner, either your MD or if you're working with an alternative practitioner, and this gives them really good data to work off of. So you guys could start working on improving your blood sugar tolerance and everything. So there's really a lot of power to be had in this strategy, but I also know that it can be a little bit more complex and maybe a little bit intimidating for people. So that's why I stayed or used it as the last example. So that really kind of sums up what I wanted to talk about today. I wrote way more information in the blog post. You guys can totally go check that out. Just to recap, so my 3 strategies for you guys today for seeing what foods work well for you is to, 1, tune into your intuition. Just spend a little bit of time like getting to know yourself and listening for those cues that your body is giving you every day. Your body is talking to you every single day. We just don't know how to listen. And so this is an exercise in learning how to listen. The next one is to do an elimination diet. You guys could do an elimination diet on your own if you feel like you want to do it, or you can do an elimination diet with a practitioner. If you're ready to do one, but you don't want to do one on your own, you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to kind of help you walk through it and create a plan that will really work for whatever your health goals are. And then last one is specifically related to carbs because they're such a hot topic today, but it's to just start testing your blood sugar and start testing individual carbohydrates and see what your body tells you. Maybe rice is going to work awesome for you, but maybe plantains don't. So this is really, really empowering information for you to know. And all of this really is going to come back into just listening to your body and learning to get you to know yourself better and tuning into your intuition. And there is no better thing that you can do for your health, in my opinion, than tuning into your intuition and your inner body wisdom. Because it's, like I said, it's going to trump the expert advice every single time. So that, I think, is pretty much it. You guys can hop over to the blog and read that if you want. I would love to hear from you. I would love to know what questions you have, anything that you want me to address. Leave me a comment down below. If it's something that's a little bit more complex, then I'll just do another Facebook Live video on it. Because I know some of you guys prefer to watch videos than read a blog post. So I totally get it. I think, let's see, Elizabeth, you had one question. Sometimes you develop hives from tomatoes, but not all the time. So you could potentially be sensitive to nightshades, or maybe you're just sensitive to the tomatoes themselves, and maybe you're fine with peppers and eggplants and potatoes. Again, you could experiment with this. I do know that some people, and even I would sometimes have reactions whenever I would grow tomatoes if the leaves touched me. I think I remember reading that there's a specific chemical in the plant itself, and I think it's nature's way of repelling insects. But it would make my skin kind of tingly and itchy and burny. And so I don't know if maybe you're getting exposed to some of that chemical whenever you're eating the tomatoes, or maybe you're growing your own tomatoes. But you know, just experiment with it and see. Not everybody has those reactions, but again, you can just start tuning into your own intuition. I'm happy to help you, Elizabeth. I really appreciate you asking the question, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I think this is probably the longest Facebook Live video I've ever done, so I appreciate you guys sticking it out with me and tuning in. Yay! Makes me happy. So let me know if I can answer any other questions. If you have any other things you want me to cover in this group, I really want to tailor this information to helping you guys get the most out of your life and the most out of this group. So leave me comments, post in the group, ask questions. I am here to serve you guys. So Elizabeth and Vicki, thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. I will talk to you guys again soon. Have a great afternoon. Bye, guys.